I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk. Joining me today is Scott Lynn. He is the CEO of Masterworks. Scott, wonderful to have you on the floor. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get started, a quick note to viewers, this interview is for informational purposes only. The NYSE doesn't recommend any investments or investment strategies. All right, so Scott, tell me, how do major players in the finance world feel about art?
I think art's a very new asset class, so most major players are becoming familiar with it over time. Obviously, endowments historically have allocated a large percentage of their portfolios to alternatives broadly, so things like real estate, sometimes gold. So art is a new asset class. Firms like Citibank were some of the first to do asset allocation models on art. Bank of America recently came out with research suggesting that art is a good hedge against inflation. So I think we're still in the very early innings, but smarter investors are starting to adopt it as an asset class.
And how has art performed in previous periods of inflation?
It's a great question. I mean, in the US, obviously the most recent inflationary period was the 1970s. So when you go back and you look at the 1970s, there were only three asset classes that gained relative value during that period. One was real estate, one was gold, and one was art. So I think real assets in an inflationary environment generally are interesting for investors.
And what are your investment returns?
Our investment returns, depending on the vehicle you look at, range between 9% and 39% on an annualized basis net of fees. So obviously, some paintings on the platform have done very well. We see certain artist markets like Banksy, which has appreciated more than 100% in the past 2 years. Obviously, that's not the norm, but you do see certain breakout artists that deliver pretty interesting returns.
All right, so yesterday, news about Paul Allen's collection. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that was very amazing. So Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, many people are familiar with, had had the largest ever single owner sale at Christie's, selling more than $1.5 billion. And I think from an art world perspective, that's interesting to us generally, but probably even more interesting in the context of Bitcoin collapsing yesterday, the Dow down, I think, 650 points. So it just continues to demonstrate that art behaves differently than a lot of these other asset classes.
All right, well, wonderful to talk with you, Scott. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.